All right. How you getting on, you well? You well? How's things? So listen, this is a very interesting, an educational, episode of the pod. Not just my normal shite. This is actually me chatting to someone who knows what they're talking about for a change, not having to go with Killian Sunderman or, Sean Burke or anyone like that. But I'm chatting to an engineer on this pod. I've teamed up with Science Week to make you Science Week at the knees. With so much information, your head's so big you collapse. No, I had a really interesting chat with Patricia Scanlon, who is an engineer in the field of AI and has been for about 20 years. She's the founder of Soapbox Labs, which is an incredible company that basically looks for speech recognition, AI, using AI to recognize the speech, specifically of kids, so that they can all be kind of graded in a kind of unbiased way to kind of free up teachers' time. She talks about it. It's incredible. And she's also Ireland's first AI ambassador, which I was like, oh my God, right. Does that mean that you're going to show up one day and be like, yeah, the AI want to harvest your organs? That's just what I'm telling you on behalf of the AI because I'm their ambassador. Turns out that's not what it is at all. And I ask her a lot of dumb questions on this pod. But she was very courteous and very charming, and we had a really good chat. And that's what this chat is for Science Week. Me and Patricia Scanlon, she let me call her Trish, talking about AI. Now, one little fly in the ointment is this. As I was looking back on the footage, right, I already feel stupid talking to someone who's so smart, right? And that's not her fault, right? She made me feel very comfortable, right? And she tolerated some very stupid questions on my behalf, right? But I was watching back on the footage, and I noticed there was just this rogue hair just sticking out of the back of my head, right? And I looked stupid, right? I already felt stupid. I looked stupid. And I thought, what can I do about this, right? I don't want to look at my hair like that. And I thought, I wonder if I can actually use AI to correct this mistake. And what I've done instead of having myself sit there and ask Trish questions is I've replaced myself with a hot werewolf version of me that was created by Cesca Saunders, incredible graphic designer and genius artist, Cesca Saunders, that I actually used for a live show a few months back, that I probably will use again for a probably full run TV show. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. I had this puppet, right? And I replaced myself with this puppet and used AI for speech recognition to have it lip sync and move its head based on how I was moving, right? So that might seem a little bit distracting, and it's not particularly funny, but it did help me feel a lot more comfortable watching back this footage. So here is Trish, Patricia Scanlon, founder of Soapbox Labs, chatting to me as a hot werewolf because I was so self-conscious, chatting with the technology of AI, talking about AI. Please enjoy. All the best. See you in a bit. What's your favorite? Do you use any kind of commercial AIs of the kind of in your pocket, quote unquote, AIs of your Siris, of your Googles, of your Alexas?
God, it's part of it's part of the damage now. I just use them. My poor kids ended up getting every single voice-enabled toy and doll for years for Christmas. My daughter doesn't even play with dolls, never did, but here's a Barbie that talks, and then we'd be going, it doesn't work. Crap.
And the Furby that you're like,
yeah. Oh no, seriously, I've got clapping toys, anything like that. But we definitely have Siri in our house. We have Alexa. We have probably every Apple device known to man. Like,
how come Siri's so stupid?
Yeah.
Is that because they're protecting our information? So what I heard is that it's some encryption issue with the fact that Siri isn't telling everyone everything.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be fair, I could say, that's being generous, but it is actually fair.
yeah.
They have issues.
Sure.
No, that's true. Right, so I know that they don't take your audio data and transmit it to the cloud attached to your identity and process it there and then therefore tune it based on who you are. It does actually reside. So they do send information, but it's just not the audio information connected to your name and your identity and stuff like that. So it will be a little more stupid. Yeah. But sometimes some of us are going to pay for that, right? We prefer that. I'd say there's other issues.
Yeah, sure.
But no, in general, that's it is a privacy stance that I know Apple take, that they fall on one side and they're very protective over data privacy when it comes to kids, stuff like that. So they've decided to fall on one side of it. Others have chosen not to. And actually, to be honest, a lot of end users don't care. They just want the free service. They want the better ads. They want the better, so they choose to fall on that side. And I think that's where it's going to go in the future. Some people will pay for privacy and some people won't.
Well, that'll be an interesting thing to talk about as well, because I do think that there probably is at some point going to be some sort of more clear divide about what internets we kind of navigate in.
Yeah.
And there's probably going to be then an AIs that derive all of their knowledge from this set internet, which is quite a terrifying idea.
Well, it's also going to be quite biased then, right?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, Kara Swisher, this US tech journalist, she's brilliant. She has a burner phone that she uses for TikTok.
Right, yeah.
Which I love that idea. That I do not trust this. Here's my burner phone.
You are an AI ambassador. You are the Ireland's first AI ambassador. Does that mean that you are biased for AI? You stand to defend AI?
Do you know what? I actually took this role and I put myself forward for it and took the role is because I have been in the space for 25 years. I could see where it was going. I know it's only the tip of the iceberg. I didn't take it just to be an advocate for AI. I actually took it because I think there's a really important conversation to be had about what AI is, what it isn't, which is, robots are coming to get us kind of thing. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah.
But there's more really important things to talk about bias, safety, security, data privacy, all these things. And that's a conversation we should be having. While I know everybody loves to jump to the singularity, as it's called, you know, the super intelligence and all that. And I took it because I think it's a really important time to start the conversation. And I wanted to help focus the conversation on stuff that's really in front of us right now. The EU AI Act is going to be enacted in the middle of next year. Ireland and all the member countries are busy drafting it and redrafting policies. It's a really important time for everybody to have a voice on this and start thinking about it and think about the real risks and the real mitigations, because there's massive benefits to be had with AI. But if we're just mindful of the risks, we can actually glean those from it.
Sure.
Without just saying, we need to have it for productivity, competitiveness, which we do, but you can actually build AI in a very thoughtful way that's ethical and trustworthy. And there's actually business benefit to that as well as being good for society. And, I just thought that was a really good thing to hopefully get people talking about and thinking about, rather than saying, how can I circumvent this regulation? How can I get my product out without having to comply? When actually compliance is actually almost like it's like a USP. It's something you can differentiate yourself in a global market where a lot of people don't care.
Yeah. Well, what are some of the main concerns in the EU AI legislation?
A lot of it, so there's things around data governance. So it's not just ticking a box saying, I give consent for my data. You know the way, because nobody reads it.
I consent for any AI to do whatever they want.
Exactly, right. And it needs to be transparent. So it's what are you collecting the data for? Are you using it for the purpose you said you would when you got the consent? How are you managing it? How are you processing? Are you deleting it when you said you would? There's loads of governance issues around it. Like, what are you using for? Are you selling it? Are you licensing? You have to comply with the rules. Is it safe and secure? That's classic, right? Are you being transparent about when it's AI and when it's not? If you're on a chatbot, I kind of want to know if I'm talking to a computer. I immediately ask, are you a robot? When I go onto a chatbot, it's really interesting.
I kind of assume they're all AI. That's why I'm so awful. That's why I'm so rude to everyone.
You may as well, yeah. But then there's things like there's AI systems that really impact people's lives around, financial decisions, loans. Like, there was a classic system in Holland that went very badly wrong about, classifying who got certain supports and who didn't.
Really?
Financial supports and stuff like that.
An AI was deciding that?
Yeah, I think there was some automation anyway. Whether it was a full AI system, I'm not sure. And then, there's issues around explainability. So if you did get rejected for a loan, well, why? And the days of people saying, well, it's AI, it's like a black box, we put data in stuff, that's not good enough anymore. Like, and it's brilliant because yes, you can build an AI system like that, but there's also a way that you can build it so that it can explain, how it arrived at conclusions. That's important. And bias, right? So is it fair? Is it, bias mitigation in it? Are the people who've built it taking into account all the use cases, all these edge cases, what happens in all these scenarios? And really in some ways it's kind of a case of looking at it going, it's not that it's easy, but it's not that hard either. But people, it definitely costs a little bit more, maybe a bit more resources and a bit more time, but you've built a much better product if you take all those things into account. And you don't really have to worry about future legislation, because if you've built it with the human at the centre and you actually care about the outcome and care about the end users, well, you're probably never going to have to worry about the regulation being outside the regulations, because you're probably already in it.
Yes.
You know, and taking that mindset as opposed to saying, oh, what do I absolutely have to do to tick boxes here to get through this?
There's something equally kind of very comforting about an AI system having to reveal why it made the decision it did, but also quite scary, where it could be like, well, kind of, you're down here, and you know, you know, that kind of revelation, and that kind of, you would have to be, it's kind of almost on a philosophical level, black and white about why we actually make the decisions that we do, that a lot of times gets completely overlooked, you know.
And true. I mean, look, another way to look at this as well is that, you know, are those decisions right? In some way, what I've seen happen is that AI, everybody goes, but the AI system can be biased. And I'm there going, well, is the human that programmed the AI, or the human that annotated the AI, or the legacy data you took to train the AI? All that has bias in it. So when one classic example is in CVs, you know, if you actually took 40 years of CVs and the outcomes about who got hired and you throw it in a system, it's going to be biased, right? We all know that, right? So are the people, so when an AI system isn't being used, are the people making those decisions, have they gone through bias training? You know, unconscious bias training, like implicit bias? You know, so that kind of thing, I think is a really good conversation. Like, you know, we can all point at the AI, but is society biased? You know, rather than pointing at the AI, going, well, maybe if there's CV screening going on, maybe we should all, whoever is doing it, an AI or a human, should have some kind of training.
Well, that's fascinating, because the example you used there is kind of something that I've heard would be, say, decision making, which would be something that, you know, people wouldn't expect maybe an AI to do, but that's certainly
fair enough.
But I'm very malleable as well. Where I'm like, that sounds great. Where I'm just like, the idea that all these AI are just making these decisions and it's so unbiased, that just sounds great to me. But what are other so I know that some people, and a big conversation about it is, you know, employability, and people kind of, is it really going to be this kind of, you know, all life, no work kind of thing, you know? So that's the plus, being a lot more leisure time, a lot more of the jobs that maybe people might not prefer to do, you know, could be done by AI.
That's that whole question about what AI will do and how it helps shape future society for good or for bad. One of the interesting things I've been encountered since I got this role is I've had loads of conversations all over the country with lots of different people, tech people, non-tech people. And on one hand, I'm in conversations around what will happen to jobs, you know, that AI might take, and maybe people have more free time, or maybe that's a bad thing because they don't have jobs, right? And on the other side, I'm in all these conversations about AI skills. We don't have enough people to do the AI, right?
Sure,
And what's really interesting is, and I think people miss a lot, is not everybody that will work in AI needs to be an engineer or a technical person. You're going to need the business minds, you're going to need the policymakers, you're going to need the people doing the data, you're going to need the user experience people, you're going to need the, you know, the design of it, you're going to need the people who are the experts in every field, like climate or fashion or biotech or all these people are going to have to come together, and they're not, because people always think, oh, it's the data scientists. Well, sure, it's just going to be jobs for data scientists and engineers. And what I see is no, because even in our business, we have, you know, quite a lot of engineers, but we've all these people around them that support them in that. And in some ways, you know, when I think back 24 years ago, I'm very old. I think back before the .com boom and the Y2K, you know, absolute paranoia that went on.
Yeah,
there wasn't enough technical people, and we were training people 3 and 6 months. People are coming out of business and stuff like that, and they were taking 3 and 6 months courses and training up to be software engineers to go in. And a lot of people have grown into complete careers in tech where they never were before that, but there was a need, and all of a sudden the need for we only hire people 4-year degrees went away because they didn't have a choice. So all of a sudden people are getting really flexible in thinking about, well, we don't have enough AI people, so what are other ways we can bring people through and help contribute to this?
Essentially, you have to have people, almost like a council, you know, of experts, to kind of keep a quality, I suppose, that the AI could maintain over a period of time.
In so many areas that I think is really interesting. I think it's going to create jobs we didn't even know exist now. We don't know exist now, as well as the stuff we actually do know. So I can be sure we don't have people for any of that right now. But then, there will be people who will be upskilled from a lot of the jobs, and you can see that happening already. So, yeah.
Where were you working during the Y2K panic?
I was actually working in Holland.
Yeah.
I left college and I got this. It was great because I was fresh out of college, zero experience, but they had no engineers anywhere. So I was whisked away and paid all this great money and expenses to go live in Holland for a year and
Amazing.
a half. Yeah.
And what side were you on? Were you anticipating these computers can't count past 99? Everything's going to die.
Can
you remember?
No, I remember thinking stuff is just going to stop working or return some errors. Planes are not going to fall out of the sky.
Sure, yeah.
But that was the panic.
Yeah,
then, right?
really,
There were people literally going, planes are going. Nobody would fly. I think that year. I think. I don't want to say there was fear.
Yeah.
Right? Well, the nuclear stations, it was just the fact that there wasn't enough decimal places, or counter space for all this to happen. And it did have to get replaced, but the panic was unwarranted. But a lot of people did very well.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
The world moved on.
They did. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because I know I suppose even the panic of that, or the idea, because that was a brand new concept. I remember, obviously I was just my Windows 95 computer, Windows 98 computer, and all I'm looking at is just a little, date in the corner, and I'm like, I can't see how that. This single, binary decision is going to, explode my computer. But I think that kind of thought, for people who are old enough to remember it, has kind of lingered on, and the idea that a decimal place, like they've done with, say, machine learning of the stock market, of rounding up or rounding down and losing millions in a day, and bringing the stock market to a standstill. I can't remember exactly when that was. I think that's or the ultimate is that. A ultra smart sentient machine is given the task of providing happiness or something broad, like some broad concept like that, like a broad task, and they find, well, if there is no mortal life on Earth, then there's no unhappiness. So there is no, or one of these success. Yeah, these kind of just tick the box kind of
it's very
ideas.
People talk a lot about sentient and the super intelligence and stuff like that. I mean, anybody in the field of AI is like, we're way away from that. I mean, if you were to, I don't know, you buy a state of the art robot vacuum cleaner and watch yourself whack itself into the skirting board 5 times, you're like, maybe not.
Yeah.
So there are people who think, it's a lot more. The potential for that super intelligence is there, and there's most people in the field would agree it's not possible with the technology we have today. It's possible it's not even in our lifetime. There's one expert, Jan LeCun, who would say, AI today is no smarter than a cat, because but in some ways because it can't have that ability to take in all the inputs from the environment and strategize and plan.
Sure.
But on the flip side, within a very narrow use case, if you take any use case like speech or image processing, it can actually do a lot more than humans, because an AI system can hear better than humans. We're limited up to about 15, 20 kilohertz, depending on what age you are. And then, the granularity within that, what we can actually hear, we can actually miss sounds. If it's within a certain, it can be hidden quite easily, where a microphone here can pick it up. Same with image processing. The computer can see better than we can. You could fly a drone over the burn and it could categorize, the progress on the biodiversity, and you could do that every week, and it would probably detect patterns that humans aren't capable of doing. So within those very narrow fields, it's really powerful and can actually do a better job than humans. But across more broadly,
the drone can't play chess.
Exactly. And that's the classic thing, right? It's really clever within that very. A really good word for it is brittle. It will break, so it can beat the world chess players, but that same system is useless in every other field. It has to be retrained. You really have to start from zero and do it all over again. That's why the experts in every field are really important to train any system, that knowledge. So in some ways people think, AI is like human intelligence, where I like to say, no, it's nowhere near human intelligence in that broad way, but it's actually better than human intelligence in a very narrow way. And that's where I think you start to understand how we could possibly leverage AI. And I'll give you an example of what we do in the US is we're helping companies deliver reading assessments into classrooms.
This is Soapbox.
Yes, Soapbox. So we it's kind of doing a task a teacher would have to do and spend 10, 15 minutes with each kid in the class, is sit and listen to them read for a minute and has to score them. They have to input the data and upload it to the system. And the AI system can just do that.
Wow.
You know, and so the teacher's freed up to actually teach
Yeah.
and do one-on-one interventions and things like that.
That also seems like towards the end of the day, you're like, this kid is either getting incredible grades or the worst grades, because you'd be so tired, like, to take in all that information.
The subjectivities matter. Apparently there was something like 18% variance in from one assessor to another when they were doing it, where the computer's really consistent.
Right, yeah.
And you built it correctly and without bias, which we strove to do and delivered it, is you can actually get a really objective system. What we've also done is done something beyond what humans can do, which is measure fluency. Intonation, you know, that rhythm of which you speak, it's a really good indicator of fluency. So you can actually take a fluency measurement that a teacher can't measure. So you could say, I read fluently, but you probably couldn't put a number on it and then compare it to the next person. It'd be really hard to do, especially with 30 kids.
Yeah, yeah.
But a computer absolutely can do this.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's a good example of how we're doing more than what humans are able to do in a very narrow field. And there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah. Well, what was the first instance of, say, machine learning or AI where you were kind of sparked, you know, in your mind that, wow, this is an incredible, the potentials for this is incredible, if you can recall?
Oh, wow. I think one of the thing I started on 2000 was lip reading. So we were getting computers to lip read. So it was more of a case of speech recognition was so bad, we had to augment it somehow, because back in 2000 it was really bad.
Yeah.
I say it was getting less than 50% right, actually, you know, with a real data set. And then the idea was around augmentation. But then the possibilities of that was brilliant, like, because then it was like, oh, well, you know, you can actually lip read, you could get, you know, there's benefits to that for, you know, in accessibility and disability and stuff like that. There's the ability to, you kind of start looking at the psychology of human perception then about, you know, how we, how our brains fuse audio and visual information. And you know, and then that starts opening up, you know, loads of things about inferring intent and, you know, where you want to go. So, you know, and roundabout eventually 20 years later, you know, we're here at Soapbox Labs, but that initial thing I really liked. It was just like a light going off my head, going, oh, wow, you can actually get a computer to lip read instead of just doing audio speech, which is what humans do, right?
But that's incredible. Well, what's been the big change in the last few years? So, as an Instagram user, I've noticed that the transcription feature and, you know, Adobe Premiere Pro all have access to this. You know, now incredible transcription, even with our accents that we have. You know, and they have not, like, or maybe they have localized it. You know, but it'll be very specific Dublin voices. You know, it's almost incredibly accurate, even to names. And I noticed from using it regularly that the Instagram one is getting better and better and better.
Okay.
Is that just from it absorbing more and more data every single time?
It was kind of a confluence of a couple of things that happened, and this really has only come about since about 2012, 2013. The use of GPUs over CPUs, GPUs and CPUs. So GPUs were the graphical processing units in computers that are mainly known for gaming, but they allowed...
And Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. True. But they allowed for much bigger mathematical operations to be performed on much bigger data sets. So, like, when I was doing my PhD, like 20 odd years ago, if I was running a neural net, and not even a deep neural net, right, it's really simple, 2 weeks it could take.
Oh,
and that'd be on some cluster in a university somewhere, right? Or you come back, or you'd run it and you go home, and if one thing went wrong, you'd start all over again. It was just horrible. And you couldn't dial in and check it because, you know, it's just too hard to. There was none of that. But so it's kind of the confluence of having a good, you know, available on demand cloud services like Amazon Cloud Services, Google Cloud Services. They're available cheaply. I mean, there'd be a massive 20, 50 grand outlay to do that cluster I used 20 years ago. Whereas now it's use on demand. So you had the processing got better. The means of collecting data, so we think, was all about internet access, right? And people using apps and web services and stuff. So data could be collected. And then the models were built from the data. So the means of internet connection, along with GPUs, the theory of neural nets was around decades. So it was like, oh, we can practically use it. So before, when I was building speech recognition 20 years ago, we'd be doing it on, you know, East Coast US accent only, and then you'd do a separate one for West Coast and Ireland. Forget about it. We wouldn't have had the data or the means to do it. But now it's kind of, well, our system, we build for every accent. Like we have voices from over 190 countries, like, you know, and that kind of thing that you it's just a different way. Everything's different. The system can actually trawl through massive amounts of data. It can ignore the noise. It can say, these are all examples of Apple. These are all examples of, and they're all correct. So you can say, now, no matter what accent or dialect it's sent in, I'm telling you, computer, these are all right.
Yeah.
And then the computer figures out what's common and what's not, and builds, you know, these different kind of models for it. Which means you can suddenly do tasks that were inconceivable all those years ago.
Do you think there's going to be protections in place to kind of so say with like AI analysis of just analyzing how we are and what we do, is there going to be kind of protection from that, keeping that information from ourselves? I'll give you an example. I put out a task for one of my followers, and he's this amazing engineer. He took all transcripts basically of all of my podcasts, and he put them through an AI, and he sent me back transcripts in a Google Drive file. He did it overnight of basically every word I've ever said in my 3 years of doing this podcast, and then he fed it through some sort of analysis of information to see if there's any kind of regular mentions of things. And I noticed that the number one thing, I said the F word more than anything else, and the number two thing is I'm, me, and I'm just like looking at this, and I'm like, I kind of wish I didn't know how self-centered I was on my podcast. And I wonder, is there, will there be things in place to kind of protect information from people that maybe they don't see because we have our own bias?
There is stuff around social scoring and stuff that is really inappropriate, like
Sure.
and surveillance and stuff. Like they will be. These are called unacceptable use cases, and just like there are kind of ethical use cases. I'm not sure if that one falls into
No, that's just more
that's my
bit of self-awareness I should have had.
Just don't look.
Yeah, just don't look. Yeah.
I mean, I think there is anything that people are. There's a lot of people thinking very deeply about this, about the damage this can do if there is any. What happens getting it wrong? Like if your Netflix recommender gets your recommender wrong, okay, it's a little annoying. I really don't want to see that again. Like,
sure.
But if a child is in the classroom and the system is constantly giving them false positives or false negatives while all their peers, it's working really well for. Like that's wrong. That's damaging confidence. Like just feeling left out, the others and stuff like that. So I think those things are really important. So there's some use cases that are really going, will have potential, like financial decision making, grants, sentencing. I think there were some examples in the US where it was being using for sentencing.
Wow.
Yeah, and they used legacy data. I wonder what went wrong there.
Oh God.
Yeah, exactly what you imagine went wrong.
Yeah.
Like, so a lot of those type of things is like. There's a lot of very high risk use cases and really damaging ones that just like, but there's a lot of really good people spend a lot of time thinking and talking about those. Like,
yeah. Do you think? I mean, I know not to kind of get into the conversation of the sentience, but there is a. I certainly have found that I'm so much more ruder to my Google Home than I would ever be to someone else. For some reason, there's been a real block on my Google Home with finding me David Bowie recently. I'm like, can you play David Bowie Moon Age Daydream? And I'm like, I don't understand. And I'm like, and I get angry at it. But if there was like someone there in my house and I'm like, can you play David Bowie?
Yeah, they got it wrong.
I don't understand.
But if they did it 10 times,
it'd be a weird thing to have like a kind of a butler in my house to be like, put on David Bowie, and I'm like, I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand.
Yeah, true.
But I do get more irrationally angry towards my AI, my phones. I mean, do you think that's okay? I mean, do you how are you with your kind of home personal AIs and assistants?
I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think in some ways, I think I love this. I love the Apple systems. I end up using them from my phone a lot. Just play.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot to be said about that in terms of humanizing it. I have a personal, against the humanization of it. Like, that it's a female Irish woman, it's a US male, it's whatever.
Yeah.
It's can we just make them tinny and roboty?
Yeah.
Do they really need to be like ultra human voices? Because they are AI systems, and there's a lot. I know people are striving really hard to be able to simulate that, and I understand in certain circumstances that's great. But in that, I don't really agree that it needs to be humanized, because
Sure.
then you do get into that scenario, especially with young kids or people using it and stuff like that, going, is it really right? Or maybe it should work, or maybe the parent gets to decide whether please has to be added or thank you before it actually works. You know,
Sure,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, let's put it back into the hands of the end users to decide whether I want to listen to a very human person, or I want to be reminded that this is a machine.
See, I worry that I would have, because I know that when I'm talking to, like, you know, Virgin Media, it's about my broadband. Like, you know, I'm a lot more curt and, you know, and I'm rude, and I'm kind of, you know, to an AI. And I wonder if, say, in a few years' time, when kind of anything that is not your social media is in communication with AI, does that affect how we start talking to each other?
Yeah.
If we aren't already there, you know, now, you know?
And again, there's a lot of, I think sometimes technology gets rushed out without much thought. And yeah, I think taking a pause and having these conversations is really good, because you know, eventually the tech companies will, you know, they'll respond to user requests, you know, if that's what we want. Or I just love the idea of optionality. That we don't become a society of subservient,
Sure.
and then they will come together.
Yes, no, definitely, 100%. Were you aware? Obviously, you've heard of this. You know, this Google engineer, this Blake Lemoine, who was then let go and may have forged some of his documents. But he says that he kind of he spoke to a chatbot that he became sentient. Were you familiar with this?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it dispelled, or what was the engineering community's stance on this?
I mean, you know, it's an excellent natural language processing system. But again, I just go back to the idea of knowing how hard it is to get the stuff to work. The fact that it's suddenly sentient, I'm like, well, there's a load of stuff I don't know then. You know, and I've been in this space 20 years. I think there's great power in it, and probably the person who not understanding the technical how it did respond, or the details of it, would spook. You know, maybe you go, wow, that's really realistic. Or, you know, a classic example is where people say, oh, the systems are, you know, Facebook's listening to me, Google's listening to me because I mentioned dog food, and, you know, it suddenly start doing, well, you know, you probably Google dog food, or you probably buy dog food at the same time every week, or you know what I mean? There's so much other information you're giving up all the time that, you know, it isn't always what you think it is.
Sure, there's a bit of bias in that.
There's the intelligence, there's a network of intelligence there that sometimes it can come across as, you know, ooh, that's scary. I just thought that. And then, you know, well, maybe you do things at the same time. A really good example of that was some guy who was flying to meet his mother. And on the way to the airport, he got a recommendation for her perfume. And he got really freaked out. He goes, I don't know. But I mean, he'd booked the flight to see his mother. He was in a taxi on the way. Every time he went to the airport, he used to buy her favourite perfume. And, you know, then, of course, the learning just served him the ad. And he just, you know, so your immediate reaction is, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then when he actually played it out, and I think he actually went in and tried to figure it out, he said, okay, there was a pattern, and it identified a pattern.
I do find it weird that Google sometimes, where I could be typing in something like, you know, Tom Cruise, and then Tom Cruise height comes up, and I'm like, I did actually want to know Tom Cruise's height specifically.
You're not that unusual.
No, I'm a real, that's a real margin case there.
Yeah.
I have this ultimate AI fantasy where, I don't know, AI can all of a sudden track my eyes or something. Say I'm in like some sort of VR. Eye tracking is a big thing. Like the new PlayStation has this, you know, eye tracking, and then it only kind of has the resolution for your kind of focal distance that you can see. So it ends up using a lot less computing power. But I have this fantasy that, you know, where we can be somehow connected to things that are actually kind of measuring our excitement levels. And the way AI art has turned into that, we actually end up having media essentially handcrafted for us based on our kind of our reaction times.
You should patent that, but it's too late to public.
That's public. I'll write it later myself. Does that seem feasible, or does that sound like a kind of crazy grotesque future?
No, it's not actually.
No.
I mean, no. You know, there's a huge amount of work I know is going on eye tracking around, you know, marketing, being able to pick up on likes and dislikes and things like that, because they want to have more targeted ads. So they will respond based on your likes, learn to know what you like, just like your Spotify does, and eventually start serving you the stuff.
Well, my Spotify's been ruined because of my son.
You got to get family sharing.
Yeah, I really do. Like, why would I want another version of Wheels on the Bus in my Discover Weekly? You know,
somebody in your house does.
Do you mind if I ask you some questions sent in by my listeners?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, actually, someone just mentioned something, because I saw that you mentioned, or with Soapbox, or as your role as AI ambassador, potential uses of AI with farming, and I found that fascinating. I couldn't quite think of any kind of use examples for that.
In farming, I know that there's a company using it for vertical farming. So they're using it for. So what they do is they put sensors all over the place in, let's say, moisture, humidity, temperature, and what they're able to do is then with image processing gauge growth. So what they can do is trial a load of different conditions and find out which ones are optimized for growing a certain vegetation.
Right.
So all of a sudden you're trying lots of things, and rather than someone going around with a clipboard, oh, that one very well, this is automated, so you can measure the temperature at different corners of it and knowing what responds and where to put heating, moisture, rain, whatever. And the idea is to optimize, because in smaller spaces and a lot of cities, and vertical farming is supposed to be one of the solutions to help address food issues,
Sure.
future food issues. But another one would be in things like rejuvenation and rewilding and claiming back our wildlands for climate change and stuff, to be able to say, well, a good example would be Boardmona, the efforts they're putting back into rejuvenating all the peatlands. To be able to say, this is working, this rejuvenation working, you could actually do that, fly it over with sensors, or fly over drones, or look at the methane or the CO2 inputs and outputs, the sequestration of carbon, all that stuff you can imagine all over the world, being able to say what is working. So we want to do X, we want to rewild, and to be able to use AI to see the patterns that we can't see, because it's too much information sometimes for us to process. You can have a computer system goes, if this and this and this and this and this, then it must be working. Or you could have an AI system process vast quantities of data from all these different sensors and the outcomes from the image processing of, to be able to say how much has grown, to say what works and what doesn't work.
That's fascinating.
And you just accelerate.
Yeah.
You accelerate solutions,
What are some because I was surprised to hear you mention that that decision making could be something that's included, or could be something that we could offload to AI. What do you think would be one of the more difficult jobs to ever replicate with AI?
A lot of that, I genuinely think creativity. I know people are looking at all these
Yeah,
art
the
that's
AI
been
art
created
has
and
been,
thing.
yeah.
It's getting very good, but it's the spark. I think it's the emotional connection. I've heard mentioned, if somebody wanted to become a doctor and they're worried about AI is going to replace it all, but to kind of balance it with your emotional intelligence and really invest in yourself and your own, your connection to humans. There's never going to be a replacement for somebody wanting to sit with a doctor who's human and can empathize with them and explain to them, rather than a robot. There's going to be limitations to responding. There's something innate in us being able to understand how to communicate with each other. It can be mimicked, and you could probably apply that in every field. That there is always going to be something that's about. So I know working. Let's all work on ourselves. Be better people. Be more emotionally connected to each other. Because I don't think there's an example where if you could walk into a shop and somebody meet you and explain to you and have a laugh with you and do that versus the efficiency. I don't know if there will be some people who will 100% just go for the efficiency of the, and there will be a lot of people who still want to connect with us. And so I think that human connection, that creativity, that empathy, I think there's a limit to what it can be.
Because there is a weird reaction. You might see like an amazing, it looks like a black and white photo, and someone tells you, oh, that's pencil, and it changes. You have that change in your mind.
Absolutely.
I suppose that could be the future, where you're like, oh, no, a person did that, and then that's the difference. You pay extra. There is issues with, say, design, where, a friend of mine, Killian, he's doing this, he's a very funny comedian, but he's got a cinema podcast, and him and his partner were trying to make art for, this podcast, and trying to look up, royalty-free uses of images or stock images, and they knew exactly what they wanted,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, which was just red velvet seats that they were looking so that they could superimpose themselves in the front. But he was saying this to me, like how amazing it is with technology, where it's like, I know it's there. Like, I know we'd have to keep looking,
Yeah.
but it is out there
Yeah.
and we can get it, you know. But there are designers who kind of, I suppose there are designers who would do that now. And I suppose with AI, it'll exclusively really be design, and then
Yeah.
the actual art would
Yes.
be, you know, used by the person, you know.
Yeah, I think it'll be the unexpected, or it'll be the elements of design that you know are relevant to the person who wants it, or
Sure.
the person who designed it, as opposed to this is what humans are. I like, because somebody ran it by me once about what about this system's AI system that's going to review scripts, and it's going to know the scripts that performed really well with focus groups, and then filter on that. And I said, oh my God, that's a world I don't want to live in.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah,
We're all going to imagine how predictable that would get,
sure.
you know, and how uncreative it would be, because
Are we not already there? You know,
yeah, yeah,
we're
and
almost
we
not over
probably
there.
are, but I think there's always going to be a demand for that. You know, we'll get really tired of that.
Yeah.
You know, we'll get, you know, and maybe there will be a period of time where people go, oh no, it's working. We're getting, and then all of a sudden it will just go off a cliff.
Yeah.
You know, because we're all going to get really tired of that, and people who think they can solve it, because I think that creativity, that spark, that unexpectedness, that connection with other humans, that empathy, or even recognizing how the world's changing, or, you know, things like that, that looking at patterns and predicting, you know, I don't know, there's an element that's going to be missed.
What terrifies me about the idea of AI being kind of tastemakers or creatives is just, you know, so we get to quantum computing and trends are literally like, you think you get off a bus and you're wearing the wrong clothes because, you know, in the journey, because things have just moved literally that fast, you know. I mean, I already feel like things move that fast that, like, I hear like my younger brother and sister and, you know, the slang they use, and I'm like, has there been an AI quantum computer who has just, you know, rewritten what it is to be cool? Yeah, so that's terrifying. Here's one from Alison Dooney. This is actually a good question. Is consciousness a computation? Does AI have, quote unquote, understanding?
I would say not now. Very much not now. But knowing how, I mean, that was go back to the Google engineer. You know, well, he wasn't an engineer actually, but, like, you know, the Google guy who perceived it as sentient and perceived it as having consciousness, but it was just doing a really good job of pretending.
Yeah.
You know, you know, it's not to say you'll never get there, but you know, when you've, you know, working in the system for a long time, that word brittleness, it can be really powerful, but knowing how brittle it is, I mean, we've a long way to go before it's anything like that. And I know there are people actively working on it, but I think that they're not the concerns I would have right now, and they're not the concerns you know, I talk to people about. I think it's where people's mind goes because it's most dramatic, and it's what we've been, you know, that Hollywood blockbuster script. Because consciousness and when the robots are coming to get us and the singularity are all the same thing, really.
Yes,
right? The AI systems get more intelligent than us.
Yeah.
But the reality is we're a long way away from that. It's not that it won't happen. Nobody could predict. I would say nobody can predict when it's going to happen. But within very narrow use cases, it's extremely powerful already. It just isn't broadly.
Yeah.
And we probably have to rethink the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, with the way it's built at the moment, there doesn't, you know, people can say there's all these new methods of transforming and stuff that to be able to learn better, but it's still that broad. Because if you think every decision you make in life, you're taking your previous experience, your intuition. Your intuition could be built from years, like going back to a child. You know, the way, like, you know,
big time.
Context, memory, like the senses, all the senses you're processing at the same time. You know, scientists don't even know how humans arrive at this. How could we possibly be teaching computers to do it? That's kind of where I sit with it at the moment. I mean, you know, we're all keeping an eye on it, where it's going, but it seems we've a leap.
If we were to get to that level, how do you think? What do you think would be the most likely technology to get us there? Would it be, you know, trying to teach, you know, a program? Would it be trying to actually replicate how a brain works digitally? Would it be, you know, trying to essentially emulate how a human brain works in that kind of way?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know. I think every piece of information you'd have to sit there and literally you'd fill every wall in this room writing down the potential for what information I'm leaning on to arrive at everything I do in life.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, the way I don't think it's limited. And I don't think to be honest, I kind of love the fact that we don't know. You know, so I think artificial intelligence. I think the definition of artificial intelligence, which is a machine that has the ability to perform a task normally performed by humans, is really wrong, because that requires human intelligence, and I think they don't have human intelligence, because our human intelligence is very lateral, like it's broad, but it in some ways can be more powerful than us in those very narrow use cases. And I think if you look at it that way, it kind of makes you understand why we have what we have today, and why those things are not a media concern. We need to keep an eye on it, but we need to mitigate the real issues today around bias data, and because that's a lot of really boring AI that's out there. That will have an effect on our lives. You might even know what's happening in the background, but we need to legislate and regulate for those ones. For the good of society, and for all of us, to keep the eye on that.
Keep the eye on the people using it.
People and
exploiting
today,
it.
and not to get. To be honest, I don't think we should get distracted by that stuff, because there are issues that we need to keep talking about and making sure everybody's behaving themselves.
Sure.
That we don't end up in a Cambridge Analytica Facebook scenario all
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah.
That's what we
Yeah.
need to be, careful of. And I think there's a lot of stuff in place, and that was really good, right? So it kickstarted a lot of good discussions, got us all thinking. But they're the issues. Almost it's kind of, for some people it'd be good if we all kept talking about the future,
Yeah.
where it's coming to get, because we'd miss stuff right in front of us.
Sure.
And it is good. It's a good conversation to be having, and I think we're all making good progress. But yeah, just keep it where keep an eye on. Let's just keep an eye on everybody. Everybody's behaving, and we can build something good.
Sure. Last question. What kind of upcoming technology, or what can you see on the fringes? One of maybe the most exciting use cases of AI for you personally.
For me, climate tech, for sure. Like everything about that, just excites me. It's just, I think, when you have a kid, I have a kid, and just this doom and gloom,
Sure.
of climate, where I'm kind of excited about the amount of investment that's going into it, the role AI will play in terms of identifying the problems, helping to explain and model out what a future will look like, is really powerful when you've got non-technical or non-climate experts making policy decisions in governments. If you can model out the future, and you can be very good about it, and you can explain it and stuff like that, and then you can use AI to help deal with it, help look at all the energy patterns of people, help people optimize their own energy uses, performance, help rejuvenate the wildlands, the planet, in stuff, what works, what doesn't work. I mean, technology and AI can help in all those scenarios, which is really, it can have a really good impact. So that's kind of, every time I see it, I just get excited, because, it takes me away from the
I know,
doom.
sure. Until you see some bumper sticker that says, keep your politics out of my AI.
Yeah. And then we all get depressed again. It's good. There's great stuff going on in healthcare, in medical, imaging device, predicting illnesses, being able to look for, drug discovery, stuff like that, to targeted drug discoveries, personalized drug discovery as well, that eventually medicine that will work better based on your physiology will take the inputs about you and give you a customized medicine. The way, there's a lot of very cool stuff that AI has been applied to in education, being able to kind of level the playing field for people to, not everybody's going to have the right conditions for education in terms of teacher-student ratios, supports and stuff like that. But AI can help that as well. Like, there's lots of good things we can do if we can, just balance the benefits and the risks.
Sure. Well, I'm sold.
Yay.
Trish, thanks so much. This was a lot of
You're
fun.
welcome. Yeah,
I
good
really
stuff.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great. That was really good.
That was